Is your progress at the piano feeling slow and frustrating? What if I told you that most music students are missing the single most powerful practice technique, and it doesn't even require touching your instrument? Welcome to the Heart of the Piano YouTube channel. I'm Bob Rose, and I'm going to show you why you're probably not making the progress that you were hoping for, and give you a really easy fix for this. The answer is not more scales, better fingering, or even more time at the piano. It's something far simpler, yet profoundly effective: listening to music. It may sound obvious, but in this video, I'm going to share with you compelling evidence from music education research, neuroscience, and my own teaching experience about why and how listening might be your most powerful practice tool. I bet that a lot of the information I'm going to give you will be brand new to you, and my challenge to you is to leave me a comment below in the comments if you didn't learn anything new by the end of this video. My aim is to motivate and inspire you to change the way that you practice for the better, using evidence and reasoning that will be hard to argue with. So let me start with a real-world example that shows you just how powerful listening can be. I like to go to piano meetups that have players at all levels. At one event was a self-taught pianist who had learned to play advanced Chopin pieces in just 1 year with really impressive musicality. Now, while their technique wasn't perfect, I would never have believed that this level of musical expression was possible in just only 1 year. So what was their secret? I think it was an almost obsessive dedication to listening to recordings. I actually did invite this particular pianist to share her experience on my podcast in an interview, but she declined because she didn't want to take even an hour away from listening to music. And this isn't just an isolated case. Without exception, every professional concert pianist I've ever spoken with has an encyclopedic familiarity with recordings across many instruments and genres that informs and influences their playing and musicality. What they all understand is this: consistent, purposeful listening to music recordings is not just a pleasant supplement to practice, it's the critical foundation upon which all other musical skills are built. Now, this makes total sense if you think about how we learn other things, especially languages. Imagine trying to learn a new language, but all you did was just study grammar textbooks without ever actually hearing anybody speaking that language. You might learn the rules, but would you ever sound natural? Would you even be able to hold a conversation? The people who learn languages best are the ones who just dive in and surround themselves with the spoken language. They pick up the accent, the rhythm, the natural way of phrasing things just by listening. Now, music learning follows a similar pattern to language acquisition, yet many adult piano students approach it almost exclusively through the textbook route, focusing on notation, theory, technique, and so on, while severely undervaluing listening. It's like trying to learn French from books without ever hearing a French person speak. This is where research into different teaching methods can offer us valuable insights. The Suzuki method, for example, is defined by a heavy emphasis on listening rather than reading notation as the foundation of musical development. Now, while it was originally created for teaching children, the research findings have implications for learners of all ages and all levels, and we'll explore this in more depth as we go through this video. In the meantime, there's another important aspect to consider. Our brains naturally process music in meaningful chunks, phrases and patterns, rather than as isolated notes. Yet, traditional piano teaching often works against this natural perception, forcing us to focus on decoding individual notes on the page and translating them into finger movements. This disconnect is why many students find learning pieces so frustrating and unnatural. They're experiencing the gap between how our brains naturally process music and how they're being taught. Studies show that students who learn through listening before being introduced to notation play more musically and actually become even better readers than those who start with sheet music. So wouldn't this seem totally counterintuitive at first? Wouldn't focusing on listening delay reading skills. But the research does show that ear-first approaches not only leads to better sight reading, but also superior results across all performance categories, such as and including tone quality, technique, and interpretation. These research findings align perfectly with neuroscience discoveries about how our brains process music. Far from being just a convenient metaphor, the connection between music and language is biologically significant. Our brains process these two skills using similar neural mechanisms. When we listen to music, we're unconsciously organizing sounds into meaningful patterns, exactly as we do when we're processing speech. Brain research reveals that musicians develop neural networks specifically optimized for pattern recognition in both music and language. This is why extensive listening proves so effective. It trains your music to grasp musical grammar at an intuitive level. So when you immerse yourself in a particular musical style, you're building mental frameworks for understanding its underlying structures. You begin to feel instinctively how phrases should be shaped, how harmonies typically resolve, and how rhythms function, all before you could explain why. This explains why truly musical players sound like they are communicating through their instruments rather than just hitting the right notes. They've absorbed the musical language so deeply through listening that they can express ideas naturally and confidently. And don't get me started on, when I'm teaching, that I see this so often that people just get pulled into, I have to play the correct notes. Everything has to be correct. This is so important. Now, this does not imply that we have to abandon notation, theory, and technical work, but rather that we need to rebalance our approach to place listening at the foundation of our practice, just as we would never expect to learn the language without ever hearing it spoken. So, while technical work does remain essential, the greatest pianists have always emphasized the primacy of musical thinking. As Benno Mosevich said, any artist worth his salt thinks music far more than he practices. This mental engagement with music, this deep listening and contemplation, provides the foundation that gives purpose to our technical work. All great professional musicians maintain this balance throughout their careers. Listen to interviews with renowned pianists, and you'll repeatedly hear them discuss the recordings that influenced them, the concerts that they attended, and how critical listening shaped their artistic development. So, let's dive into exactly how listening actually transforms your brain and then ultimately your playing. So have you ever heard of mirror neurons? Mirror neurons, these are these special brain cells that fire not only when you do something, but also when you watch somebody else doing the exact same thing. Your brain is physically mirroring that experience, helping you to quickly learn new skills, intuitively grasp other people's intentions, and empathize through shared experiences. And these mirror neurons are also important for music. Brain scans show that when pianists listen to pieces that they already know, the motor areas of their brain, the parts that control movement, light up as if they are actually playing, even though they're not moving or consciously aware of even thinking about moving. It's like their brain is practicing the piece just by listening, which means that listening is a form of practice. It's strengthening those same neural pathways that you use when you sit down at the piano. And listening also improves musical memory. So in one study, researchers taught beginners a simple melody, complete beginners. Without any further practice at the piano, some of the people listened to recordings of that piece throughout the week. And then other people had no exposure to recordings of the music at all during the week. And when they were all tested a week later, those who listened to the music were able to remember and play the piece with better note accuracy, timing, and even dynamics from memory, while those without the listening exposure actually got worse at performing it. And even people who had the music playing while distracted by other tasks that the researchers had given them still showed improvement. Now, not as much as the listeners who were focused on listening to the music, but still significantly better than the people who didn't hear it at all. So, think about the implications for your own practicing, for your own development as a musician. And think about how you can improve your skills just by even having music on in the background that you're not even really paying attention to. Now, many great pianists develop sophisticated approaches based on this kind of principle. For example, Walter Gieseking, who was famous for recommending learning and memorization of music away from the piano before playing a single note, said, "It is greatly preferable to hear each voice in the music in your mind's ear, and indeed it is a necessity, the way a conductor needs to hear each instrument in his mind. You can verify that you're actually hearing each voice by singing the voices in turn, then playing that voice on the piano to check your accuracy. Your oral memory will eventually guide your fingers, and every detail of the music's sound will form an integral part of your mental impressions of the piece." So, beyond memory, listening also transforms how you develop technical skills at the piano. When most people think about developing piano technique, they imagine hours of finger exercises, scales, etudes, and so on. And yeah, that physical training is certainly important. But what many people overlook is how our concept of sound guides our physical movements in the first place. What happens when great pianists prepare to begin playing? They first imagine the sound that they want, which then shapes their physical technique. Less experienced players, I'd say most adult piano students who are not professionals, often focus primarily on their finger movements with little thought to the sound that they're actually trying to create. Gould, the eccentric piano genius renowned for his Bach interpretations, expressed this idea clearly when he said, "Fingers don't have much to do with playing the piano. The idea that they do must be unlearned." Even for someone with Gould's incredible technique, it was all about their inner hearing guiding their physical movements, not the other way around. Without a clear mental image of your desired sound, your technical practice lacks direction, like trying to hit a target that you can't see. Joseph Hofmann, one of the greatest pianists of the early 20th century, and actually I've been listening to his stuff recently, he had unbelievable technique, just so clean, so even. He said, "When studying a new work, it is imperative that a tonal picture of perfect clarity should be prepared in the mind before the mechanical or technical practicing begins." This is why students who listen extensively develop better technique. Their practice becomes more purposeful and efficient because they're always comparing what they hear to that ideal sound in their mind, making tiny adjustments until it matches. It's like their ears are guiding their hands. Now, let's look at some research on the effect that listening can have on reading music. So imagine two groups of beginning musicians. One group starts by reading notes on a page. The other listens extensively to recordings well before ever seeing notation. Which group do you think would end up being better at reading music? So I think that most people would guess the group that starts with the notation, right? But the research consistently shows that ear-first listeners become superior readers. In a really interesting experiment with clarinet students, for example, researchers compared traditional notation-based teaching with a listening-first approach. The results were really striking. The ear-trained students significantly outperformed the group who learned with notation first, with sight reading. And beyond that, they also showed superior results across all performance categories, including tone quality, technique, and interpretation. Similar research with beginning adult piano students in group classes revealed a similar pattern. when these adults were taught to play by rote before seeing any printed music, and only later introduced to notation after several attempts at playing by ear, they scored much higher in both pitch reading and rhythm reading tests than those who learned through traditional reading-only methods. Why does this work so well? It's all about how our brains naturally process music. Think about learning a language. We don't start by analysing the rules of grammar. We listen, we recognise patterns, and we develop an intuitive feel for what sounds right. Music works the same way. Through immersive listening, we absorb musical grammar, how harmonies resolve, how phrases breathe, how rhythms flow. When you eventually encounter notation, it's like reading a language you can already speak, rather than a foreign one. The symbols are connected to sounds that you've already internalized, making the whole learning process more natural and effective. But there's a hidden challenge that all piano students face without even realizing it. Cognitive scientists have discovered what they call visual dominance, or the Colavita effect, a powerful tendency in human perception where visual input not only takes priority, but can completely block out other sensory information. Studies have shown that when people are presented with conflicting information from different senses, vision almost always wins. Our brains are basically wired to trust our eyes more than our ears. A striking effect is the McGurk effect. If you close your eyes and hear someone say bar, bar, that's what you'll hear. But if you watch their lips appear to say far, far, even with the sound unchanged, your brain will actually perceive the sound of far instead. Visual input literally rewrites what you hear. So I'm going to leave a link in the description below to a video where you can experience this for yourself. It's really eerie. It's bizarre. And so even when specifically asking people to pay attention to sounds, they still regularly miss them while having all their attention pulled to distracting visual information. This all happens automatically below conscious awareness. And this natural tendency has been amplified by broader cultural shifts in our culture. We live in a world where images increasingly dominate our experience. Over centuries, Western culture has gradually privileged the visual over all the other senses, from Renaissance art to photography to today's screen-based world. Social media, advertising, news, all designed to prioritize the seen over the heard. This visual turn in our society has fundamentally altered how we process information, often relegating sound and other senses to secondary roles. At the piano, this creates a real challenge. While playing, your brain processes multiple streams of information, watching your hands, hearing the sounds, feeling the keys. For many pianists, the visual component easily overwhelms the other senses. This explains why you might play through a piece while watching your fingers or watching the music, yet remain completely unaware of evenness in the sound quality that's immediately obvious to your teacher. Your eyes are literally blocking your ears from giving you feedback. And you can experience this as well if you've ever recorded yourself playing and you listen back to it and go, I didn't realize I was doing all those things, because you're not hearing as you're playing, you're not able to hear what you're doing. This perceptual narrowing intensifies under any form of pressure, whether in performance, during challenging practice sessions, or when feeling frustrated, or in piano lessons. This is very normal, Your attention field literally shrinks, focusing even more intensely on visual elements, which is typically your fingers or, visual details in the sheet music, further diminishing your already compromised listening awareness. But there's good news. Research shows that musicians with extensive training demonstrate reduced visual dominance compared to non-musicians. Through years of focused attention on sound, they've developed more balanced sensory processing. This suggests that dedicated listening practice away from your instrument can help you to stay connected to what you're hearing, even when your attention is being pulled away by visual distractions. And beyond these perceptual challenges, most piano students simply don't listen to enough of the kind of music that they're studying in their daily lives. With constant competition for attention from social media, streaming video, and algorithm-driven content, many students go long periods without hearing the styles of music that they're learning to play. In the past, we probably made more deliberate choices about our listening, putting on records, cassettes or CDs with fewer distractions competing for our attention. It was much easier to listen to a whole album without the temptation to jump to something else. But today's music streaming technology has fundamentally changed our listening habits. The ability to instantly skip tracks has shortened attention spans for extended musical pieces. Many people struggle to give their full attention to anything but the most instantly gratifying, superficially short pieces of music, undermining the sustained engagement that listening and playing both require. By recognizing these challenges, we can make more conscious choices about our listening habits. We can set aside time for focused listening sessions, and we can practice staying with longer musical forms, rebuilding our capacity for deep listening. Now, I want to share another possibly surprising reason why regular music listening can profoundly improve your physical technique at the piano. So, as I already mentioned, most adult students trying to improve their playing think that all the answers to becoming better pianists lies in the physical aspects, such as, fingers, hand position, technique, and so on. But sports research reveals a principle that powerfully applies to music. In sports psychology, studies consistently show that athletes perform better when they are focusing on the intended outcome rather than their body movements. So golfers improve more rapidly when thinking about the ball's trajectory, where they want the ball to go as well, rather than the mechanics of their swing. Swimmers go faster when focusing on pushing the water back rather than thinking about the position of their arms. This external focus approach has transformed coaching across virtually every competitive sport. And this principle works equally well for playing the piano. Well, there are certainly times when we need to focus on specific movements, just as athletes do during technical training. Many pianists get stuck in this internal focus of the mechanics of how their body moves and fingers and technique. By shifting your awareness to the sound that you're imagining that you want to create, you'll find that your body, your fingers, your wrists, your arms are much more able to find their own efficient solutions to technical challenges. This is why listening profoundly enhances your playing. When you immerse yourself in recordings by great pianists, you're developing clear auditory targets, such as the poetry of Horowitz's playing, the clarity of Glenn Gould's counterpoint, or the dazzling fire of Yu Zhiwang's performances. These sound qualities become part of your auditory imagination. And when you practice with these sound images guiding you, your approach changes fundamentally. Instead of mechanical repetition with very little progress, I call this spinning your wheels when I talk to my students about this. Your practice becomes a process of active experimentation. Your body naturally begins to find the most efficient physical means to produce the sound that you're imagining. Your fingers, hands, and arms adjust until what comes out of the piano aligns with the sound that you are imagining. And this goes well beyond producing beautiful tone. When you listen attentively to really great performances, you begin to absorb the underlying architecture of the music. You start to recognize how harmonic progressions create tension and resolution, how motifs develop, and how formal structures shape the overall narrative. This insight reshapes your approach to interpretation. You begin to understand why a particular phrase feels like a question, while another provides the answer, or why a certain harmonic shift creates a sense of arrival. These insights help you make choices that serves the music's inherent structure rather than just surface effects. You'll find yourself feeling much less trapped by what's on the page as well. While respecting the composer's intentions remains important, you begin to understand that the score is just a blueprint. The living music needs informed, tasteful interpretation. The goal is not to copy the interpretations that you hear, but to develop your own musical voice. As you absorb diverse approaches to the same music, you naturally form personal preferences, creating interpretations that reflect both tradition and your individual sensibility. When you connect with music at this deeper level, your performance abilities naturally evolve. Rather than merely relying on visual memory of notation and your muscle memory of physical movements, both valuable but inherently fragile, your playing becomes guided by comprehensive musical understanding. As Franz Liszt, one of the greatest pianists who ever lived, advised his students, think 10 times and then play once. This thoughtful approach to practice, where mental preparation precedes physical execution, creates more secure and meaningful performances while actually saving time and effort at your instrument. So when you have this deep understanding from all the listening that you've done, it gives you so much more confidence when you perform. You're not worried about missing notes or messing up a passage. You're focused on communicating the music, connecting with the audience. When you're less anxious, your playing naturally becomes more expressive and more nuanced. It creates this positive cycle. The more you listen, the better you understand, the less you worry, and the more beautiful your music becomes. And there's a practical advantage as well. Pieces learnt with extensive listening often remain accessible for months or even years, requiring only minimal review to bring them back to performance level. This durability comes from engaging multiple memory systems rather than just depending on mechanical repetition alone. So, before we wrap up, let's quickly address a few common concerns about listening practice. But I don't have enough time is a very frequent objection. But listening can actually save you time. You can develop musically during lost moments while you're commuting, cooking, winding down before bed, and so on. While practice time can be limited, listening keeps your musical development progressing even when you can't get to the piano. Another concern that I often hear is that I'm afraid that I'm just going to copy other people's interpretations rather than find my own voice. But in reality, listening to many interpretations can do the opposite by expanding your awareness of possibilities. When you expose yourself to diverse approaches to the same piece of music, you naturally begin to form your own preferences that reflect your personal musical voice, all while gaining a deeper understanding of the broader tradition. Having said that though, for me personally, as my students become more advanced, I do prefer them not to listen to the exact piece they're listening in the earlier stages of getting to know it, but I do absolutely encourage them to listen to as many other pieces by that composer or in that same style, that same genre. But that's a topic for a whole different video. Many students also say to me, I'd love to listen to classical music, but I just don't know where to start. So this is such a common issue. This really deserves its own video. Finding essential recordings, discovering music that you're likely to enjoy, and learning about pieces in an accessible way. These are topics that I'm going to make a future video about, or many videos probably, specifically about how to build your listening library. And I'm also going to cover more of these kinds of objections and how you actually apply these things into your own practice in future videos. So do click on like to support the channel below, and click on subscribe and click on the notification bell so that you know when these future videos come out. Anyway, in the meantime, Just start small. Choose a piece that you're working on or one that you're curious about, and you just listen to it for a few minutes each day. Notice the details, the phrasing, the dynamics, most importantly, how it makes you feel, and see how that listening changes your own playing. These results will hopefully motivate you to expand your listening practice in ways that fit your life. So, in conclusion, taking these small steps towards more listening will lead to something truly magical. At its core, listening lies at the heart of what music truly is. It's not just another practice technique, it's the missing element that can transform your entire musical journey. When you make listening more a part of your daily life, your connection to music becomes deeper. Your playing becomes more musical, more personal, and far more enjoyable. Technical challenges that once seemed insurmountable begin to resolve naturally as your ears guides your hands. If I could leave you with just one piece of advice, it would be this: fall in love with listening. Let the music of great pianists fill your ears and your imagination. Listen while walking, listen before sleeping. Listen to pieces that you're working on and listen to pieces that deeply move you. This simple practice nourishes your musical development in ways that technical exercises alone never could. And in future videos, I'll show you how to create an effective listening routine and share specific ways to apply what you hear to your playing. For those of you who are in the UK, I'm also going to introduce you to incredible free streaming services that give you access to virtually every classical recording that's ever been made, as well as a treasure trove of incredible videos that you won't find on YouTube, resources that many people do not realize are available for free. Now, if you'd like to be notified when these videos are available, please do click on subscribe below and on the notification bell. And please do take the time to click on like to support the channel if you enjoyed the video and found it useful. And also, I do teach online at the moment. I have space in my online studio for online students. If you're interested, there will be a link in the description below for how to get in touch with me. So, thank you for watching. I'd love to hear how listening changes your playing. Do leave a comment below with some of your experiences or questions. And in the meantime, go and do some practicing or watch more of my videos. So take care. Goodbye.